Nestled in a fairly nondescript downtown spot, Broadway and Columbia, is the fairly nondescript Regency, formerly the Hungerford Hotel. Behind it is the Mummy Restaurant, leading its patrons down into what could be described as a basement-type structure. Funny, as the Hungerford had a basement as well, and what was found there on April 15th, 1954 was unexpected and hard to explain. April 14th, 1954. A small fire broke out in the basement of the Hungerford, creating a mess and forcing personnel there to clear out several items. It was during this cleaning that a container was discovered, containing the cremated remains of a woman named Sarah A. Barker. This was strange in and of itself, but what was more strange was that Sarah Barker had died 44 years before then, way back in 1910, at the age of 83. When these remains were taken and her name checked against records, it was revealed that they'd been shipped to Grand Rapids, Michigan, presumably to be placed in a funeral home or kept by family members there. So how the hell did it end up in the basement of a downtown Portland hotel? At the time, nobody had any idea. And for the most part, neither do I. It's a bizarre, if not small, discovery that leaves all sorts of questions to be answered. So here they come. Why did Sarah's remains end up in Portland? Why at the Hungerford? Did she have a connection, or was she staying there at some time? Did she pass away while living there? Well, we actually know the answer to that question, which is no. Again, she died in 1910, and the Hungerford wasn't built until 1926. But did she at least die in Portland? Where was she cremated? And if she'd been taken somewhere to be cremated, someone would have had to come and pick up her ashes, or possibly at least request for the ashes to be shipped to Michigan from there. But still then, how did these ashes end up in a building that wouldn't be erected for another 16 years? And if the ashes were in Portland, how did it show up on official documentation that they had in fact been shipped to Michigan? An initial explanation that I felt made at least a little sense was that the container had been mistaken for something else and had bounced around until ending up in the Hungerford's basement. But there were immediate holes with this idea. First, it seems a little far-fetched that this would be the case. And second, well, we know the identity of the individual whose remains were in this canister. We wouldn't know that unless there was a label or a marker on said container indicating this. So the whole idea that this canister was mistaken for containing something else goes out the window, at least as far as I'm concerned. I feel there is one particular scenario that, while it cannot be proven, I feel provides possible answers to the questions I've posed here. This is that when Sarah Barker died, her ashes were sent to Grand Rapids. Afterward, her canister was kept by someone, likely a family member, who either moved or paid a lengthy visit to Portland years later. This would explain records showing the remains had been shipped and how it ended up in Portland many years after Sarah's death. How they ended up in the basement of the Hungerford is a little harder to answer. Perhaps the one responsible for keeping the ashes had lived at the Hungerford for a while. Perhaps they got permission to store the remains in the basement, and over time their presence there was forgotten. Maybe the keeper of the ashes passed away, and no one knew or thought to retrieve this forgotten canister. I feel this is, at least as far as I can tell, the strongest theory for this case, but again, we don't know for certain. On a whim, I tried to see if I could find any further information on this Sarah A. Barker. I did, strangely enough, find someone with that exact name who was born the same year as our Sarah, 1827, and died the same year as her, 1910. But this Sarah lived her whole life and was buried in New York. Not the same person. This story was good for little more than a 2-paragraph, 3-sentence blip stuck on the side of page 12 in a Eugene, Oregon-based newspaper. And yet it solicited so many questions in terms of what and why. And as far as I know, they never resolved these questions back in 1954. I can only hope they at least got Sarah's remains back to the right person or the proper resting place. It is true, sometimes the best stories are the little ones that you're most likely to miss.